It had been an uneventful week in the quiet, dusty town of Larkspur. The heat was sweltering, and the town's inhabitants had grown used to the slow, rhythmic pulse of their everyday lives. I, however, had always hated the monotony. It was why I worked as a freelance mechanic, fixing ships and equipment in the quiet corners of the town, far from any glitzy, bustling city. There was a peace to it, but also a gnawing sense of boredom that I couldn't quite shake. That all changed the day I met Inari. I had been called to a strange old ship parked just outside the town. The ship looked ancient, cobbled together from parts of who knows how many different vessels. The cockpit was a mess of mismatched controls, wires hanging loosely from every corner. But the strangest thing about the ship was its owner, an elderly alien woman, hunched over in a way that suggested years of hardship, yet still remarkably alert. Her species, the Ziltri, were known for their long lives, but this one had the frailty of someone nearing the end of their long journey. She greeted me with a warmth that was immediately disarming, despite her appearance. Her eyes, an unearthly shade of violet, gleamed with a strange intensity that made me uneasy. "I am Inari," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I need your help, young one." I shifted uncomfortably, glancing back at the ship. "I can fix your engine, but it's gonna cost you. Parts are rare around here." Inari waved a gnarled hand. "I have something more valuable than credits. My family has long ago abandoned me, and my ship is all that's left of my past. But I can't make the repairs on my own." I found it difficult to focus on her words. Her species wasn't exactly common in this part of the galaxy. I had read about the Ziltri in books, beautiful, wise, and always cloaked in mystery. They were like legends, like myths, often said to possess a deep connection to the fabric of time itself. The thought that she had been alone in this old wreck of a ship made my chest tighten. "Why don't you have anyone helping you?" I asked, half out of genuine curiosity, half to fill the silence that hung between us. Inari's eyes darkened slightly, her expression softening. "There is no one. My kin, my family, they have all moved on. The universe has little room for the old, the forgotten." There was something about her vulnerability that struck a chord in me. I had seen old ships like hers before, relics from long past eras, but never with someone so clearly tied to their past. I swallowed hard, suddenly feeling an empathy I hadn't expected. She wasn't just an alien, she was a being with a history, a person who had lived for so long and seen so much. Perhaps too much. "I'll help you," I said, without thinking. Inari's expression shifted into one of gentle surprise. "Thank you," she said simply, before reaching into a compartment in her ship and pulling out a small, ornate object. It was a pendant, shaped like an ancient crescent moon with intricate runes etched into its surface. It glowed faintly, casting a soft light across the cockpit. "Take this as a token of my gratitude," she said, pressing the pendant into my hand. I hesitated, unsure of the weight of what I was accepting. "I didn't help you for this, Inari. I just..." She smiled warmly, the lines of her face crinkling with the motion. "Take it. It's part of my people's heritage. Perhaps it will remind you of your good deed when times get difficult." Reluctantly, I accepted the pendant, tucking it into my pocket. It felt heavier than it should have. I didn't think much of it at the time. Maybe it was just the weight of my own decision to help someone in need. I was no hero, after all. I was just a mechanic. It didn't take long for me to finish the repairs. The old ship hummed back to life after hours of tinkering, and Inari seemed relieved, her posture easing as if a great weight had been lifted. I had expected her to thank me profusely, maybe even offer me something more substantial than an ancient artifact, but she simply smiled and nodded. "You've done more for me than anyone in a long time," she said. "But your journey is not yet over." I gave her a puzzled look. "What do you mean?" "You will soon understand. My granddaughter, her name is Kaylin, will come for you. She is the one who will need your help next." Before I could ask her more, Inari had turned away and begun preparing her ship for launch, her movements slow but purposeful. She didn't look back as she disappeared into the cockpit, leaving me standing there, unsure of what had just happened. I should have walked away. I should have finished the job and gone back to my quiet life, not getting involved in whatever strange family drama Inari had hinted at. But something about her, the quiet desperation in her eyes, the way she had seemed to speak not just to me, but to my very soul, kept me from leaving. Then, just as I turned to walk back to town, a shadow fell across me. I looked up and froze. Standing in front of me was a woman, the most striking woman I had ever seen. Her long, black hair flowed behind her like a river, her violet eyes gleaming with a mix of curiosity and challenge. She wore a cloak, simple but elegant, and carried herself with an air of quiet authority. "You are the one who helped my grandmother," she said, her voice low but commanding. I swallowed hard, suddenly feeling out of my depth. Yeah. I fixed her ship." Kaylin smiled, but it wasn't a smile of gratitude. It was something sharper, more calculated. "She told me you would be waiting here. She said I should find you." I blinked, trying to process what she meant. "What for?" Kaylin's gaze never wavered. "She said you would marry me." I stood there, speechless, my mouth dry. "Marry you?" "Yes," she replied, her smile never fading. "You see, my grandmother believes you are the key to our family's future. And as such, it is now your duty to marry me." I stood there, frozen, trying to process what Kaylin had just said. The words hung in the air between us, heavy and surreal. Marry her? What was she talking about? This couldn't be real. This wasn't the way things worked, not in my world. Yet here I was, facing the granddaughter of an alien woman who had just asked me, outright, to marry her. I stumbled, trying to gather my thoughts, but nothing came out. "I don't know what you mean. This isn't how things are done. I barely know you." Kaylin tilted her head slightly, her violet eyes studying me like a puzzle she was trying to solve. "You helped my grandmother," she said slowly, as though repeating something simple. "And in her culture, helping an elder is considered a bond, a promise of sorts. She believes that the person who helps her in such a way is tied to her lineage. In this case, you. My grandmother has made her decision. And now, it's time for you to fulfill it." I opened my mouth again, but no words came. This was madness. My mind raced, but it was clear that she wasn't just saying this as some kind of joke. The seriousness in her eyes, the way she spoke, made it all seem so official. But none of this made sense. Marrying someone I barely knew because of some old tradition? I had come to Larkspur to fix ships, not become embroiled in an alien family's ancient customs. I didn't agree to anything, I finally managed to say, trying to regain some sense of control over the situation. "I'm just a mechanic. I fixed her ship, that's it. There's no deal here, no bond." Kaylin's lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. "Oh, but there is. Whether you realize it or not, you've already made the first step. And my grandmother doesn't make promises lightly. She sees things in people. In you, she sees potential, and she believes that this union will help both our families, my people." This is crazy," I said, shaking my head. "You can't just. You have no idea what you've stumbled into," Kaylin interrupted, her tone still calm, but now there was a hardness to it. "This isn't just some marriage for convenience. It's a union that will bind our cultures. It will bring our people together, or at least give us a fighting chance. You don't understand what's at stake here." I ran my hand through my hair, trying to wrap my mind around what she was saying. She had to be mistaken, right? This was some misunderstanding. But the longer I stood there, the more I realized she wasn't backing down. And maybe I was just too tired of my life as it was. Maybe this strange alien woman and her grandmother had found something in me that I didn't even know existed. "You want me to marry you, to help your people," I muttered, more to myself than to her. "But what if I don't want to get involved? What if this isn't what I want?" Kaylin's smile softened, just a fraction. "This isn't about what you want, not anymore. This is about what's been promised, what's been set into motion. You can refuse, of course, but it won't change the fact that the choice has already been made." My heart raced. This was bigger than me. Bigger than anything I had ever encountered in my quiet life. I wasn't equipped for this. I was just a mechanic from a backwater town, with no knowledge of alien politics or promises made by people from another world. The weight of Kaylin's gaze was unbearable, but it was her words that hit the hardest. "Why me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Why would your grandmother choose me? I'm just a mechanic. I have no power. I have nothing." Kaylin's expression changed, her eyes darkening with a strange intensity. "Because you helped her when no one else would. Because you see her, and not just the legend. That's what she needs. Someone who isn't afraid to stand by her. And someone who will see through the darkness, to what we really are." It was then that I noticed something else, something hidden beneath her words. She wasn't just talking about her grandmother. She was talking about herself. About her people. Her family's legacy. There was a desperation in her tone, a need that resonated deep within me. I had come to fix a ship, but I had stumbled into something much larger. I took a step back, trying to put some space between us, but Kaylin stepped forward, closing the gap. "You're scared, I know," she said, her voice low. "But you can't back out now. Not when you've already committed. This is the way things are. And whether you're ready or not, the path you've started walking is one that leads to something greater. To something you can't even imagine yet." I swallowed, my throat dry. "And what happens if I refuse?" She met my gaze, unblinking. "Then you will be leaving behind more than you know. There are forces at play here, forces that you can't see yet. But my grandmother sees them. She sees the future. And she believes you are part of it. If you refuse her, it will have consequences, not just for you, but for everyone." I felt the weight of her words settle over me, heavy and suffocating. There was something ancient, something powerful in her voice. A warning, a promise, a threat. I didn't know what to make of it. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this wasn't something I could simply walk away from. This wasn't just about marrying Kaylin. It was about something much bigger, a destiny I hadn't asked for, but that was being thrust upon me. "I don't know what to do," I said, my voice cracking under the weight of the situation. "I didn't sign up for this." Kaylin studied me for a long moment, as if weighing my every word. Then, finally, she sighed, her gaze softening just a little. "You don't have to decide right now," she said, her voice quieter now. "But know this, you've already made an impression on my grandmother. She believes in you. And maybe, just maybe, you'll come to believe in this, in us, too." She turned then, her cloak swirling behind her as she began to walk away, but before she disappeared from view, she glanced back at me. "You'll see. Soon enough." As I stood there in the fading light, the pendant Inari had given me suddenly felt heavier. The weight of it pressed against my chest, as though the universe itself was trying to tell me something. Whatever this was, whatever was unfolding, I had no idea how to navigate it. But it seemed like there was no turning back now. The days that followed were a blur of confusion and uncertainty. Kaylin's words echoed in my mind long after she had disappeared from my sight, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the heavy burden of her grandmother's mysterious promise. I had never been one to believe in fate, but here I was, caught in the middle of something that seemed more like destiny than mere coincidence. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that the choice I faced wasn't as simple as refusing or agreeing. It wasn't just about marrying Kaylin, it was about everything that came with it. About her family, her legacy, and the power that ran through her veins. Power that I still didn't fully understand. I had returned to my small workshop, the familiar hum of the ship engines and the clinking of tools grounding me in something I could control. But the peace I had once found here was gone, replaced by a gnawing sense of dread. Every time I picked up a wrench or tightened a bolt, my mind wandered back to Kaylin and the strange, ancient bond that seemed to have been forged between us. For days, I stayed away from her, afraid of the pull that I could feel drawing me back to the world she inhabited. The world of ancient promises, bloodlines, and magic. But sooner or later, I knew I couldn't avoid her. There was no running from this, no hiding from whatever was waiting for me. On the fourth day after our encounter, I found myself standing in front of Inari's ship again. The metal hull gleamed in the fading sunlight, a reminder of everything that had transpired. I hadn't heard from Kaylin since she left me standing in the dust, but her presence loomed over me, a constant reminder that my life had shifted in ways I couldn't yet comprehend. I knocked on the hatch, my heart pounding in my chest. A few moments later, the door slid open with a hiss, revealing Kaylin standing there, her arms crossed over her chest. She studied me without saying a word, her eyes cold, as though she were sizing me up. "I've been thinking," I said, trying to steady my nerves. "About everything you said. About what's at stake." Kaylin didn't respond at first, her gaze unwavering, but after a beat, she stepped aside, gesturing for me to enter. "Come inside," she said, her voice soft but firm. I hesitated for a moment before stepping inside. The interior of the ship was unlike any I had seen before, elegant but worn, like something out of an ancient fairy tale. The walls were covered in intricate carvings, and soft blue lights illuminated the various chambers. It was a world that felt both familiar and alien at the same time. "I've spent a lot of time thinking about your offer," I said, once we were seated across from each other at a small table. "I don't know if I can do this. If I'm the one to help you, to help your family. I don't even understand what's going on, Kaylin. I'm just a mechanic. I don't belong in your world." She studied me, her expression unreadable. "You're right about one thing," she said slowly. "You don't belong in our world. But that's the beauty of it, Axel. You've been chosen. My grandmother believes in you, she sees something in you that I don't think you've recognized yet." "I'm not some hero," I said, frustration creeping into my voice. "I'm not equipped for this. I didn't ask for any of it." "You didn't have to ask for it," Kaylin replied. "This is bigger than you, bigger than both of us. This is about the future of our people. And it's about the power that my grandmother believes you can help us reclaim." I leaned back in my chair, trying to process her words. There was so much I didn't understand. What power? What future? I had never asked to be caught in the middle of a family feud, especially one involving ancient aliens and the kind of power that had once ruled the galaxy. "I don't know if I can give you what you want," I said, my voice quieter now. "I'm not like you, Kaylin. I don't have the bloodline. I don't have the magic." She looked at me for a long moment, her violet eyes glowing with something I couldn't quite place. "No, you don't have our magic. But you do have something that we need. Your heart, your ability to see us, not as gods or rulers, but as people. My grandmother saw that in you." I was about to respond, but before I could say anything, the ship's systems chimed with an alert. Kaylin glanced at the display before standing up swiftly. "We've been found," she said, her voice calm but urgent. "They're coming for us." I stood up, confusion and panic gripping me. "Who's coming for us?" "Enemies," Kaylin said, already moving toward the control panel. They've followed us for days. My grandmother knew it was only a matter of time before they found us. Enemies? Who? Others who want the power we have. People who want to stop the Varyan from rising again. She turned to me, her expression hardening. And people who would do anything to keep us from reclaiming what's ours. I didn't have time to process her words before the ship shuddered under the force of an explosion. The lights flickered, and the systems went into emergency mode, a harsh red flashing across the control panels. "We need to leave," Kaylin said, her voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around us. "Hold on tight." I grabbed the nearest strap to steady myself, my heart racing. Whatever this was, it was real. I had already gotten too involved. There was no turning back now. Kaylin took the controls, guiding the ship with expert precision. The sounds of explosions grew louder, and I could feel the ship lurch as it was hit again, but she didn't falter. Her hands moved over the controls like a seasoned pilot, and for the first time since I had met her, I saw a different side to her, the side that wasn't just the granddaughter of Inari, the side that was a warrior. "You've come to fight," I said, barely able to hear myself over the roar of the ship's engines. "Haven't you?" Kaylin didn't answer at first. Instead, she pulled the ship into a sharp evasive maneuver, sending us hurtling away from the enemy fire. When she spoke again, her voice was cold and resolute. "This isn't just about fighting," she said. "This is about survival. And if we don't survive, the legacy of my people is lost forever." The ship jolted again, and I braced myself, gripping the edge of my seat. I didn't know what had just begun, but it was clear that my life had just taken a turn I could never have anticipated. And in that moment, I realized one thing for certain: there was no going back. The sound of the ship's alarms rang in my ears as Kaylin expertly navigated the ship through the fiery onslaught of enemy blasts. We were in a tight spot, surrounded, outgunned, and outnumbered. But Kaylin didn't seem to flinch. She was in her element, her hands moving with the confidence of someone who had been through this kind of chaos countless times. I was less certain, but there was no time to question what was happening. The enemy ships, sleek, dark vessels with sharp angles and glowing red lights, had come out of nowhere, suddenly surrounding us with deadly precision. From the looks of it, they were no ordinary pirates or mercenaries. The coordination in their movements spoke of something more organized. Military. And from the way Kaylin was reacting, I knew they weren't just after the ship. They were after us. "I told you this would happen," she said, her voice calm, even though I could hear the strain in it. "They'll do anything to stop us." I clutched the side of my seat as the ship shook violently, a blast from the enemy rocking us again. My heart pounded in my chest. "Who are they?" I yelled over the noise, trying to keep up. "What do they want with you, us?" Kaylin's eyes flickered to the rearview screen, where several of the enemy ships were closing in on us. Her face was taut with concentration, but beneath the focused exterior, I saw a flash of something dark. Fear. Or maybe it was anger. "They're part of a faction," she said, her voice tight. "A group that wants to maintain control over the Varyan legacy. They think we're too dangerous, too unpredictable. They'll do anything to keep us from gaining power." I couldn't understand it. If they were after her, after the legacy she carried, why hadn't they come sooner? Why had they waited until now? Why now? I asked, trying to make sense of everything. Why not before? Kaylin didn't look at me, but I could feel her tension mounting. She gritted her teeth. "Because we've gotten closer. We've almost found the last of the Varyan bloodline, the key to everything. Once we find them, everything changes." I barely processed her words, as my focus was on the sudden barrage of blaster fire coming from the ships behind us. "So, they're not just trying to stop you, they're trying to stop your people from coming back." She nodded sharply. "Yes. If they let us succeed, the power of the Varyan will return. And they'll be nothing more than a relic of the past. I could see the gears turning in Kaylin's mind, her every movement filled with purpose. But I wasn't sure if she was fully prepared for what we were about to face. This wasn't just about running or fighting, this was about something much bigger than either of us. We took a sharp turn, dodging another round of blasts, and the ship began to gain speed. The air was tense, and the space outside the cockpit seemed to close in on us. I could feel the weight of it in my bones. We weren't just running away anymore, we were racing toward something. Something that was tied to her past, and now, to my future. "Hold on," Kaylin said suddenly, her voice filled with a sharp command. "I'm going to give them something they won't expect." Before I could ask her what she meant, the ship jolted again as we shot forward, faster than I thought possible. My heart lurched in my chest as Kaylin expertly dodged another incoming strike. Then, in the blink of an eye, she initiated a jump, an FTL maneuver that sent us rocketing into the stars, leaving the enemy ships behind in a burst of light. I could barely catch my breath as the ship's violent shaking settled into a low hum. Kaylin's hands were still gripping the controls, but her posture relaxed just a little. "That should buy us some time," she said, breathing a little more easily. "We've made it to neutral space." Neutral space. My mind was racing. What did that mean? Where were we? I tried to steady my own breathing, but the adrenaline still had a hold of me. "How long do we have? Until they catch up?" "Depends on how quickly they can track us," Kaylin answered, her eyes scanning the data streams flashing across the screens. "I've set a course for a hidden outpost. It'll give us a place to regroup and figure out our next move." I watched her work for a moment before something nagged at me, something important. "Kaylin. What happens when we find the Varyan bloodline? What's the plan?" She paused, her fingers hovering over the console for a beat longer than necessary. When she finally spoke, her voice was measured, almost cautious. "The bloodline is everything. It's the key to unlocking the full power of the Varyan. Whoever holds it controls the legacy. My grandmother believes that once I'm married to you, the final piece will fall into place." I swallowed hard, the weight of her words settling over me. So that's what this was about. The marriage wasn't just some alien tradition, it was the key to unlocking the power they had all been searching for. It was about blood, legacy, and power. And I was tangled in it now, whether I liked it or not. "And when we find them," I said slowly, "what happens to us? To me? What happens when this whole thing is over?" Kaylin didn't meet my gaze at first. She kept her eyes on the controls, her fingers moving as she set new coordinates. Then, with a quiet sigh, she finally turned to face me. "I don't know," she said, her voice softer now. "I don't know what comes after. But we won't be able to turn back. Once we're there, once the bloodline is in our hands, we will be the future of the Varyan. And whatever happens after that, we'll have to face it together." There it was again, together. The word that had been hanging between us since we first met, since the moment I decided to help her. I didn't know what that meant yet, but I knew one thing for sure, whatever lay ahead, I couldn't face it alone. Not now. The ship's engines hummed softly as we sailed through the deep emptiness of space. The stars stretched out before us like an endless sea, and for a moment, the danger, the chaos, seemed a distant memory. But I knew better than to think we were safe. The hardest part was yet to come. The legacy of the Varyan. The bloodline. Kaylin and I, bound together by forces beyond our control. And now, it was only a matter of time before we reached the place where everything would change. The journey through neutral space felt endless, even though it had only been a few days. The vastness of the stars outside the ship's hull seemed to stretch on forever, a reminder that we were far from the familiar. Kaylin remained calm and focused, her gaze constantly shifting from one readout to another as she guided the ship toward the coordinates of the hidden outpost. I, on the other hand, was restless. Every time I thought I had my mind wrapped around this insane situation, new pieces fell into place, only to send me spiraling again. This whole marriage, this union, it wasn't just a formality. It was the key to unlocking something much bigger. A legacy. A bloodline. The power of the Varyan. But what did that mean for me? For us? Kaylin kept talking about together, but I had no idea what that actually meant. Was I simply a pawn in her family's game? Or was there something more to this connection, something that had little to do with the legacy and everything to do with us? The ship's artificial gravity hummed softly as I walked across the bridge, my thoughts spinning in circles. Kaylin had retreated to the cockpit hours ago, and I hadn't seen much of her since. She was always so composed, so assured. But I knew there was more beneath the surface. Her cool exterior hid a world of emotion, of history, and of a destiny she had been forced to shoulder alone. I stood in the doorway of the cockpit, watching her work. She didn't notice me at first, her fingers dancing over the controls, her eyes glued to the data streams flashing before her. But when she finally looked up, her expression softened, though there was a touch of exhaustion in her eyes. "Can't sleep?" she asked, her voice quiet. I shook my head, stepping into the room. "No, just thinking." She nodded, her gaze returning to the monitors. "I know the feeling. The weight of everything, it can be overwhelming." I walked over to the seat next to her, unsure of what to say. The silence between us stretched for a moment, until Kaylin broke it again, her voice more vulnerable than I had heard it before. "Do you ever think about what this means? About what's at stake?" she asked, her tone steady but carrying a quiet fear underneath. I thought for a moment, unsure of how to answer. The whole situation felt like a blur, something that had happened so fast it left me reeling. But one thing was becoming clear, no matter how much I tried to step back, I was already too deep. "I think about it a lot," I finally said. "But I don't know what it means yet. I don't know where I fit into all of this. It's not like I'm one of your people, Kaylin. I don't have any of the power, any of the history you do." Her eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw something different in her gaze. Not just the resolve or the challenge, but something raw, a need. "You don't have to be. You never did. You've already helped me more than you know." I sat down beside her, feeling the weight of her words, the vulnerability she had allowed to slip through. "But you've been carrying this weight your whole life. Your family's legacy, their expectations, your grandmother's promises. How am I supposed to just step into that?" Kaylin sighed softly, turning her chair slightly toward me. "Because it's not just about the legacy anymore. It's about us. What we build together." My heart skipped a beat. "What we build?" I repeated, almost stunned. She smiled faintly. "Yes. What we build. You're not just a means to an end, Axel. I never wanted that. I wanted someone who could understand. Who could help me find my way back to what's mine, yes, but also to what we could create. Together." I didn't know what to say. Her words hung in the air, their significance sinking in slowly. There was something else here. Something between us. But it was too new, too complicated to define in one conversation. The ship lurched suddenly, throwing us both forward. The alarms went off instantly, and Kaylin's hands flew to the controls, her face hardening as she took command. I grabbed the nearest seat, the familiar chaos of battle settling back in like an old friend. "Shit," she muttered under her breath, her eyes scanning the incoming data. "They found us." I couldn't help but feel a sense of inevitability wash over me. It was happening, everything I had been avoiding, everything I had been trying to ignore. There was no more running, no more hiding. We were about to face whatever had been chasing us all along. "They've got us," Kaylin said, her voice steady despite the growing danger. "They know we're close to the outpost. We need to fight back." I grabbed my seat, gripping the armrests as Kalen began evasive maneuvers. The ship shuddered again as another blast hit us, and I could hear the distant sound of explosions, the sharp crackle of enemy fire. I didn't know who these enemies were, or why they had come for us, but I knew this wasn't just a fight for our lives. This was a fight for our future, whatever that would look like. "Can you hold them off?" I shouted over the din. "I'll try," she said grimly. "But we need to be quick. The longer we stay in their sights, the worse it'll get." I could see the fire in her eyes now. It wasn't just the fire of someone trying to survive, it was the fire of someone who was finally stepping into her power, finally embracing the legacy that had been thrust upon her. She wasn't just running from this anymore. She was fighting for it. And for the first time, I realized that maybe, just maybe, I was part of that fight. I wasn't just the mechanic anymore. I wasn't just a pawn in someone else's game. I was part of the story. Kalen executed a daring dive, sending the ship plummeting toward the surface of a nearby moon. The sudden change in direction threw the enemy off balance, and I could see the briefest flicker of hope in her eyes as we managed to break free from their lock. We had lost them, for now. But the battle was far from over. "Hold tight," Kalen said, her voice filled with determination. "We're going to make it. And when we do, we'll be ready." I didn't know if I believed her. But I knew one thing for certain: we had come too far to turn back now.